Have you ever found yourself in a relationship, whether romantic, family, friendship, or even professional, where something felt subtly off, but you couldn't put a name to it? A feeling that slowly creeps in, like a quiet tension beneath everything you say and do. Maybe you started questioning your reactions, doubting your memory, or trying a little too hard not to upset the other person. These sensations are not random. They often appear when someone is manipulating you silently, strategically, and without ever admitting what they're doing. Silent manipulation rarely begins with something obvious. It doesn't start with yelling or insults or anything that clearly crosses the line. Instead, it begins with tiny deviations, micro behaviors that seem harmless. A dismissive comment here, a small guilt trip there, a joke that feels slightly too sharp, or a moment of silence that feels more like punishment than calm. At first, you interpret these moments as misunderstandings, stress, or personality differences. You tell yourself it's no big deal. And that reaction is exactly what makes silent manipulation so effective. It works best when you don't notice it. Emotional manipulation is a psychological process in which someone attempts to influence your feelings, your choices, and even your self-perception to benefit themselves. What makes it powerful isn't aggression, but subtlety. It relies heavily on three psychological levers. The first is emotional confusion, creating moments that make you question whether your reactions are valid. The second is psychological dependency, shaping situations so you begin to rely on their approval or validation to feel stable. And the third is perceptual distortion, a gradual shift in the way you see events, yourself, and the relationship, often leading you to believe you're the problem, even when you're not. When these three elements work together, the effect is profound. You begin to trust the other person's interpretation of reality more than your own. You start apologizing more often. You blame yourself for conflicts. And little by little, you lose the emotional clarity you once had.
You might notice this manipulation in everyday interactions. Imagine you express that something hurt you, and instead of engaging with your feelings, the person tells you that you're being dramatic or overly sensitive. Maybe you try to discuss something important and they shut down, ignore you, or simply disappear for hours or days, as if your emotions were an inconvenience they're punishing you for. Or perhaps you celebrate a personal achievement, something you're proud of, only to receive a comment disguised as a joke, but sharp enough to cut into your confidence. They might even laugh and say, "Relax, I'm just teasing," even though something inside you tightens every time it happens. Individually, these moments feel small, easy to dismiss, but together, over days, weeks, and months, they form a pattern designed to destabilize you emotionally. Over time, you learn to silence yourself to keep the peace. You learn to anticipate their reactions. You learn to avoid topics that you know will trigger dismissive or punishing behavior. And in that process, you slowly lose pieces of yourself. One of the most confusing aspects of silent manipulation is how inconsistent the manipulator can be. They're not cold or cruel all the time. In fact, that's what makes the cycle so strong. Some days they're attentive, warm, affectionate, or charming. They may go out of their way to make you feel valued, chosen, and special. And it's exactly that contrast, the oscillation between warmth and coldness, that binds you to them emotionally. You start believing the good version of them is the real one, and that the negative behavior is just temporary, caused by stress or something you did wrong. You begin chasing the good moments and internalizing the bad ones. Over time, this dynamic takes a toll on your self-esteem. You begin doubting your emotions, questioning your instincts, second-guessing your memory, and losing trust in your own sense of reality. You might find yourself explaining your actions excessively, apologizing reflexively, or trying to predict what will set them off. You may even believe that if you just behave perfectly, if you communicate a little better, stay calmer, or avoid conflict, everything will go back to normal. This belief keeps you invested in a situation that slowly drains you.
But manipulation doesn't just affect how you see yourself. It also affects how you relate to the world. You may stop sharing details of the relationship with friends because you're afraid they won't understand. You may isolate yourself emotionally because you don't want to make things worse. You may feel ashamed of how uncertain and confused you've become. And the manipulator benefits from this because the more isolated you feel, the easier it is for them to maintain control. The turning point in silent manipulation rarely comes from the manipulator revealing themselves. Instead, it comes from your internal experience. The red flags appear not in their behavior, but in your emotional responses to that behavior. You begin feeling tension in your chest before conversations. You hesitate before speaking. You rehearse what you're going to say, making sure it won't be misunderstood or used against you later. You edit your personality, softening parts of yourself, hiding your opinions, dimming your emotions. These are powerful signs, not of weakness, but of your intuition trying to warn you. When you notice that you're no longer showing up as yourself, something inside you starts waking up. Silent manipulation becomes visible the moment you stop focusing on their behavior and start paying attention to how you feel after interacting with them. Do you feel calmer or more anxious? Stronger or smaller? Clear or confused? Grounded or destabilized? These internal reactions rarely lie. To regain emotional clarity, it helps to quietly observe the relationship from a more neutral perspective. Ask yourself whether the person's actions consistently match their words. Notice whether the confusing behaviors happen once in a while or repeatedly. Pay attention to whether you walk away from interactions feeling supported or diminished. The moment you begin asking these questions, even internally, you start breaking the psychological fog that manipulation creates.
Talking to someone you trust can also help bring clarity. Sometimes a single outside perspective is enough to remind you that your feelings are real and that what you're experiencing is not normal or healthy. But even more important than outside validation is learning to validate yourself again. Your discomfort is not random. It's not drama. It's not exaggeration. It is an emotional alarm, and alarms do not go off for no reason. Silent manipulation doesn't destroy you suddenly. It wears you down slowly. It erodes your confidence in small, almost invisible increments. You don't realize how much has changed because it happens one compromise at a time. One moment of silence instead of speaking up. One swallowed emotion, one apology that wasn't really yours to give, one self-betrayal after another. Healing begins when you recognize how much of yourself you've softened to survive the relationship. Awareness is powerful. The moment you see the pattern, something inside you shifts. You may not act right away, and that's okay. The first stage is reclaiming clarity. Understanding what is happening, recognizing that your instincts were right all along. The confusion begins to fade, and in its place, something stronger begins to grow, the desire to protect yourself emotionally. If anything in this message resonated with you, breathe. You're not imagining it. And the fact that you're recognizing these signs means you are already taking back control of your emotional life. If you want to understand the specific tactics manipulators use, how to identify toxic patterns early, or how to rebuild your confidence after being emotionally manipulated, I can go deeper with you whenever you're ready. Just let me know.